The morning sun filtered weakly through the tall courthouse windows, painting thin golden lines across the polished floor of Des Moines District Courtroom 4B. The air was still, thick with that particular tension that only serious trials carried. Reporters whispered in the hallway, lawyers shuffled files, and jurors exchanged uneasy glances, all waiting for a case that had gripped the city for months. At the center of it all sat Aubrey Miller, barely 3 years old, her tiny legs dangling above the floor. She clutched a faded stuffed puppy to her chest, a toy whose fur had long lost its shine, but not its comfort. Her mother, Claire Miller, sat beside her, hands trembling as she tried to focus on the papers her attorney had given her. Across the courtroom, the defendant, a large man in his 30s with cold eyes and a stiff jaw, avoided everyone's gaze. He was charged with assault and domestic violence, a charge that carried not only years in prison, but the weight of what had been done in front of a child. Judge Harriet Collins, a woman known for her composure and steady hand, entered quietly. The courtroom rose. Aubrey, unaware of the ceremony, simply stared at the big wooden desk where the judge sat, fascinated by the shiny brass nameplate. "Be seated," Judge Collins said, her voice firm yet calm. As everyone sat, a faint jingle of a metal tag echoed from the corner. A German shepherd, calm and steady, lay on a mat near the witness stand. His nameplate on the vest read, K9 Officer Rex. Many in the courtroom had seen police dogs before, but few had seen one allowed inside during a hearing. Rex wasn't there for intimidation. He was there for comfort. Part of a pilot program in the Iowa justice system, Rex was trained to provide emotional support to victims and witnesses during testimony, especially children. Officer Donna Ruiz, Rex's handler, sat near him, her uniform crisp but her demeanor gentle. She'd been through dozens of cases with the dog, but something about this one felt different, heavier somehow. Claire Miller's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, the witness for today is Mrs. Claire Miller. However, her daughter Aubrey is present and may remain quietly beside her for emotional comfort." The judge nodded. "Very well. The court understands the sensitivity of this case. The child may remain, provided she causes no disturbance." All eyes shifted toward the tiny girl. Aubrey blinked, then hugged her stuffed toy closer. For a while, the courtroom returned to the rhythm of questions, answers, and evidence. Claire spoke softly, recounting the night her world changed, the shouting, the broken glass, the fear. Her voice quivered when describing how she had shielded Aubrey from the blows, how sirens had finally broken the silence, and how a barking dog outside had been the sound of rescue. Across the aisle, the defense attorney objected occasionally, but the words seemed to fade into background noise compared to Claire's trembling truth. During a pause in the proceedings, Judge Collins called for a brief recess. The room filled with murmurs as people stretched and whispered. But amid the shuffle, something subtle happened, something no one expected. Aubrey slipped quietly from her chair. She walked, almost tiptoeing, toward Rex. The dog lifted his head immediately, his dark eyes locking onto hers. His tail thumped once, softly. Officer Ruiz noticed, but didn't move, curious about what would happen next. The toddler stopped just in front of Rex, her little shoes squeaking against the floor. She tilted her head, studying him the way children study something both familiar and magical. Then she said in a soft, trembling voice that somehow carried across the room, "You remember me, don't you, Rex?" The murmurs stopped. Even the hum of the overhead lights seemed to fade. A judge looked up from her notes, eyebrows raised. Officer Ruiz blinked. Claire froze, her hand halfway to her daughter. Rex shifted, then slowly leaned forward, pressing his nose against Aubrey's small hand. His tail wagged again, once, twice, deliberate, gentle. Aubrey smiled faintly. "You barked that night," she said, barely above a whisper. "You barked and scared the bad man." A silence like no other fell over the courtroom. Even the clerk paused typing. Officer Ruiz rose slowly. "Your Honor," she began softly. May I approach?" Judge Collins nodded, motioning for her to continue. Ruiz knelt beside the little girl. "Sweetheart," she said kindly, "do you know Rex from before today?" Aubrey nodded, her curls bouncing slightly. "He came that night when Nami cried. He barked outside and made the man run away. I saw his light." Ruiz felt a chill crawl up her spine. That detail, the light. Rex's vest had a small LED strip that flashed blue during deployments. How could this child possibly remember something that happened in chaos, in darkness, in trauma? Claire covered her mouth as tears spilled freely. The prosecutor turned toward the detective at the back of the courtroom, both realizing what this meant. The child had witnessed far more than anyone thought. The defense attorney started to object. "Your Honor, this..." But Judge Collins lifted a hand. "Not now," she said firmly. "Let her finish." Aubrey looked up at the tall, serious woman behind the bench. Her small fingers still brushed Rex's fur. "He barked because he's brave," she said. "He told me it would be okay." Rex gave a small huff, almost like agreement. Laughter might have broken the tension, but no one dared to move or speak. The judge's expression softened, her voice low but steady. "Officer Ruiz," she said, "this child seems to recall a significant part of the event. Make note. We'll revisit it formally." Ruiz nodded, still kneeling beside the girl. "Yes, Your Honor." Then she looked at Aubrey again. "Do you want to sit with Rex a little while?" The child nodded eagerly and sat cross-legged beside the large German shepherd, her stuffed puppy resting in her lap. Rex, calm and patient, settled down beside her, one paw extended protectively near her shoe. For the first time that morning, the courtroom felt peaceful. Even the adults who had come expecting arguments and anger now found themselves silent, watching something far more powerful unfold, a bond beyond words, born from fear intertwined. Judge Collins glanced toward the prosecutor, then back at the girl and the dog. "Court will reconvene in 15 minutes, she said softly. As the gavel tapped once, the sound echoed not with finality, but with wonder. Reporters whispered that something extraordinary had just happened. A 3-year-old had spoken more truth in a few words than any testimony yet. When the court emptied for recess, Officer Ruiz stayed behind with Rex and the child. Claire knelt beside her daughter, pulling her into her arms. "Sweetheart," she whispered through tears, "how did you remember him?" Aubrey smiled tiredly, her eyes glistening. "Because he barked loud, Mommy. He was talking to me." And in that moment, as sunlight touched the floor again, every adult in that room understood that justice, in its purest form, sometimes came not from witnesses or lawyers, but from the innocent truth of a child who simply remembered a dog's courage. The recess bell echoed faintly through the corridor, but inside courtroom 4B, hardly anyone moved. Most people were still replaying the moment they had just witnessed, a tiny girl whispering to a police dog, as though he were an old friend. Judge Collins had retreated to her chambers. Yet even she hadn't stopped thinking about the child's quiet words. He barked because he's brave. Now, as the 15-minute break drew to an end, the courtroom refilled. Lawyers shuffled papers, reporters tiptoed back into position, and spectators whispered into their phones. Everyone wanted to see what the judge would do next. Officer Dana Ruiz adjusted Rex's harness and glanced down at him. "You're famous already, buddy," she murmured. The German shepherd gave a single slow wag of his tail, eyes fixed on the bench as if awaiting orders. Claire Miller sat again beside her attorney, trying to steady her breathing. She had testified through fear, humiliation, and pain, yet nothing had shaken her like seeing her daughter approach the police dog unafraid. She shouldn't remember any of it, Claire whispered, half to herself. Her lawyer leaned closer. Sometimes the mind keeps what matters most. Across the aisle, the defense attorney was less philosophical. He leaned toward his client, whispering furiously, "This could prejudice the jury? A toddler and a dog? It's emotional manipulation." But when Judge Collins re-entered, all conversation stopped. She settled into her chair, adjusted her robe, and said evenly, "Court is back in session. I will remind counsel that this remains a fact-finding hearing, not a spectacle." Her eyes softened, though, when they landed on Aubrey. The little girl still sat cross-legged beside Rex, one hand buried in his fur, the other clutching her stuffed puppy. She looked calm, too calm for a courtroom full of adults arguing over the worst night of her young life. The prosecutor, Liam Hayes, rose. "Your Honor, before we continue with Mrs. Miller's testimony, the state respectfully requests a brief clarification regarding the minor child's earlier statements. It may relate directly to the incident." The defense sprang up. "Objection. The child is not a sworn witness. Any statement is hearsay at best and imagination at worst." Judge Collins lifted a hand. "Noted. However, this court has discretion in preliminary matters. I will allow limited questioning for the purpose of clarification, informal, gentle, and non-leading. Officer Ruiz will remain beside the child. Proceed carefully, Mr. Hayes." The room held its breath. Hayes crouched slightly to meet the girl's eye level. "Hi, Aubrey. My name's Liam. Do you remember me from earlier?" Aubrey nodded. "You talk loud," she said matter-of-factly. A ripple of laughter broke the tension. Even the judge smiled. Hayes chuckled softly. "I'll try to talk quieter, okay? I just want to ask you something about Rex. You said he barked the night your mommy was hurt. Can you tell me what you remember hearing?" Aubrey looked at Rex. "He barked 2 times. Then I heard the glass crash. Mommy said, 'Run.' But my feet were sleepy." Claire covered her face, tears returning. The prosecutor's voice gentled even more. "Did Rex come inside, or was he outside?" "Outside," Aubrey said, frowning as if concentrating. "He had the shiny light on his jacket." That single detail, the light, made Hayes glance at Officer Ruiz, who nodded subtly. Only those on scene that night knew Rex's LED strip had been turned on when they entered the yard. "Thank you, Aubrey," Hayes said quietly. "You helped me understand. You can keep sitting with Rex now." The judge exhaled. "That will be all." She turned to the stenographer. "Please mark the child's informal remarks as part of the recess record." The defense attorney jumped to his feet again. "Your Honor, we move to strike." "Overruled," Judge Collins said without hesitation. "The court recognizes the child's statements only as contextual background, not sworn evidence." Her gaze sharpened. "But I also recognize authenticity when I hear it." A low murmur rippled through the courtroom. Reporters scribbled furiously. Officer Ruiz felt Rex lean slightly against her leg, a silent gesture of readiness. She bent down, whispering, "Easy, boy. You did good." When proceedings resumed, the prosecutor called Detective Evan Burke. His testimony reinforced the sequence. The 911 call, the smashed window, the terrified mother clutching her daughter in a corner when officers arrived, and Rex's bark echoing through the night, recorded on the body cam. Burke hesitated before finishing. When we entered, the child wasn't crying. She was staring at Rex, reaching for him. We had to hold the dog back until the scene was secure, but he kept trying to go to her. Aubrey looked up from the floor and smiled as if she remembered. The defense again objected. Speculation about a child's reactions. But the judge overruled. "You may proceed." As the testimony unfolded, spectators began to realize what made this case extraordinary. It wasn't merely about guilt or innocence. It was about connection, the instinct of a trained dog to comfort, and the memory of a child who trusted that comfort above all else. Outside, rain began to tap against the high windows, soft but persistent. Inside, the sound gave the courtroom a hushed rhythm. After Detective Burke stepped down, Judge Collins called for another short recess. She didn't usually allow two breaks so close together, but something told her the room needed to breathe. When she left, conversations erupted instantly. Reporters crowded near the back, whispering headlines. Toddler recalls attack through K-9 companion. An emotional day in Des Moines Court. Near the front, Officer Ruiz crouched beside Aubrey again. "You're doing amazing, kiddo. Do you want some water?" Aubrey nodded. As she drank from the small paper cup, she looked at the badge on Ruiz's uniform. "Do you and Rex always help people?" Ruiz smiled. "We try our best. Even little people like me?" "Especially little people like you," Ruiz answered, voice catching slightly. Across the room, Claire watched the exchange and mouthed thank you. By the time Judge Collins returned, the mood had shifted from tension to quiet awe. She resumed her seat and said, "Let's proceed with redirect." The defense gave one last attempt to discredit the emotional wave. "Your Honor, this entire proceeding is turning into a story hour. We must remember the rules of evidence." Judge Collins fixed him with a steady gaze. "Counsel, stories are how truth reaches those who cannot speak in legal terms. Proceed with dignity or not at all." He swallowed hard and sat down. From there, the questioning returned to Claire Miller. Her answers grew steadier, anchored now by the simple courage of her daughter. "When I heard Rex bark," she said, "I knew the police were close. That's when I finally fought back." Liam Hayes nodded. "And that's how you escaped through the back door?" "Yes," she said, voice trembling. "Aubrey was screaming for Rex. It gave me strength." The judge made a note, then set her pen down. "We will adjourn for the day." She looked toward the child. "Aubrey, thank you for being very brave." Aubrey's cheeks dimpled as she smiled. Rex was brave first. The gallery laughed softly, not mockery, but pure admiration. Even the bailiff smiled as he escorted the parties out. Outside the courthouse, rain had turned the steps slick and shiny. Reporters waited under umbrellas, but for once they spoke quietly, as if afraid to disturb the fragile goodness that had filled the room. Inside the hallway, Officer Ruiz knelt beside Aubrey one more time. "You know, you helped everyone today," she said. "Really?" "Really. You reminded grown-ups what courage looks like." Aubrey leaned forward and wrapped her tiny arms around Rex's neck. "He's my hero," she whispered into his fur. Rex stood perfectly still, then gave a low, rumbling purr of a sound that made everyone nearby smile. As they walked down the hall, Judge Collins stepped out of her chambers and watched them go. For years she had presided over hundreds of cases, thefts, fraud, violence, all heavy with paperwork and procedure. But none had ever left her with such a feeling. Justice, she realized, wasn't always about the letter of the law. Sometimes it was about a bark in the dark, and a child's voice small enough to change the way a courtroom listened. And somewhere deep inside the courthouse, that whisper still seemed to echo, the whisper everyone had heard but would never forget. Morning sunlight streamed again through the high courtroom windows, chasing away yesterday's rain. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant and old paper ordinary things that somehow made the place feel heavier today. Reporters had arrived early, whispering about the child who spoke to a police dog. But for Judge Harriet Collins, it wasn't a headline. It was a mystery she needed to handle with care. When she took her seat, she scanned the room. Claire Miller looked tired but resolute. Little Aubrey sat quietly beside Officer Dana Ruiz and Rex, coloring on a pad the bailiff had found. The German shepherd lay still, eyes half closed, yet alert to every sound. To most, he looked asleep. To Dana, he was working, reading the emotions of everyone near him. Court is now in session, Judge Collins announced. We continue with the matter of State versus Dawson. The defendant barely looked up. His jaw twitched, but otherwise he remained a statue in a cheap suit. His attorney shuffled papers, pretending confidence. Prosecutor Liam Hayes rose. Your Honor, yesterday's recess produced information we believe may clarify certain events. The child's spontaneous remarks correspond with physical evidence previously overlooked. The defense scoffed. Are we truly treating a toddler's chatter as admissible? Hayes didn't flinch. No, counsel. We're treating corroborated detail as truth, no matter whose mouth it came from. Judge Collins nodded slowly. Proceed. Hayes turned toward Detective Burke. Detective, after yesterday's hearing, did you review the canine body cam file again? Yes, sir. At timestamp 2147, the dog's cam records a faint child's voice consistent with the victim's daughter. You can hear her say, Rex, come get mommy. The audio was faint before, but enhanced playback confirms it. A ripple of shock moved through the gallery. Claire covered her face. She'd never known Aubrey had spoken during the chaos. Judge Collins leaned forward. Play the segment. The courtroom dimmed as the lights were lowered. On the large monitor, grainy footage appeared. A shaky view from Rex's collar camera, flashing blue light slicing through darkness. A man's shout, a crash of glass, then faint but unmistakable, the trembling voice of a small child calling for the dog. Moments later came the echoing bark everyone remembered. When the screen went black, no one spoke. The only sound was the soft pant of Rex at Dana's feet. Hayes cleared his throat. Detective, based on this, can you confirm the child was present and aware? Yes, sir. The audio and timestamp place her in the same room as the victim seconds before officers entered. Judge Collins exhaled slowly. So her recollection yesterday wasn't imagination. The defense attorney rose again, but his protest died under the weight of silence. Even he seemed to understand that logic would sound cruel here. From the witness bench, Claire whispered. She remembered the barking. The judge looked at her gently. Mrs. Miller, you may step down if you need a moment. But Claire shook her head. No, Your Honor. I think she needs to finish it. All eyes turned to the child. Aubrey had stopped coloring. She looked up at Rex, then at the judge. Do you want to tell us something, sweetheart? Judge Collins asked softly. Aubrey's small voice floated through the room. Rex barked, and the bad man ran. Mommy fell. Then the glass went boom. Her words were halting, as if pulled from somewhere deep in memory. Dana felt goosebumps rise on her arms. The judge motioned for a court aide to bring a microphone closer, but whispered, Don't get too close. Let her stay near the dog. Aubrey continued. Rex came in when the door broke. He looked at me and didn't bite. He was careful. She turned to the defendant's table, frowning. He barked at you. The man flinched for the first time. Gasps rippled. Judge Collins's pen paused midair. Sweetheart, she said, keeping her voice calm. You remember him? Aubrey nodded slowly. He smelled like beer and smoke. The description hit Claire like a thunderbolt, details no one had ever told her daughter. Dana's throat tightened. This was no coached recollection. It was sensory truth. The judge finally said, That will be sufficient. She gestured for Dana to lead the child back to her seat. Thank you, Aubrey. You helped us understand. As the little girl settled again beside Rex, the gallery exhaled as one. Judge Collins removed her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. Let the record show. The minor's unsworn remarks corroborate timeline and sensory evidence. We proceed to closing statements tomorrow. Gavel down. But the emotional noise lingered like an aftershock. Outside the courthouse, the late morning breeze smelled of wet pavement and coffee. Reporters crowded near the steps, shouting questions. Officer Ruiz. Is the dog officially a witness? Someone laughed. Dinah managed a polite smile. He's not a witness, she said, patting Rex's neck. He's a listener. Inside the hallway, Claire crouched beside her daughter. You did so well, baby. Aubrey's eyes searched her mother's face. Is Rex okay? He looked tired. Dana knelt next to them. He's fine, sweetheart. He just worked very hard. The girl pressed her small hand to Rex's fur. He remembers me. Yes, he does, Dana said. And he's proud of you. They walked together toward the exit. Each step echoed softly, the sound mingling with distant murmurs from reporters and lawyers. The courthouse, usually cold and impersonal, felt strangely alive, as if even its marble walls had witnessed something pure. At the front doors, Judge Collins appeared unexpectedly. Out of her robe now, she looked simply like a weary woman holding a cup of coffee. Mrs. Miller, she said, approaching quietly, I wanted to thank you for your composure. And Aubrey, she bent slightly. I'm very proud of how brave you were. Aubrey's eyes widened. Are you the boss of the courtroom? Collins chuckled. Something like that. Then can you give Rex a medal? The judge smiled. I think he's already got one in his heart. Aubrey nodded solemnly, satisfied with that answer. When they left, Dana lingered at the top of the courthouse steps, watching them walk toward the parking lot. She felt something unfamiliar hope. So many cases she'd handled ended in bitterness. This one carried a quiet sense of healing. She looked down at Rex. You ready to go, partner? The dog glanced up, tongue lolling slightly, tail giving that steady wag she knew so well. Yeah, she murmured. Me too. That evening, as darkness settled over Des Moines, Judge Collins sat alone in her chambers. She replayed the footage again, the small trembling voice saying, Rex, come get Mommy. She'd presided over 23 years of criminal law, yet nothing had ever struck her so deeply. Children were supposed to forget trauma, not narrate it with such clear tenderness. She closed her notebook and whispered into the quiet room. Sometimes truth barks before it speaks. Out on the courthouse lawn, sprinklers hissed to life, and the city's noises softened into night. Tomorrow would bring verdicts, paperwork, headlines, but tonight, for once, the system had listened not to evidence alone, but to the fragile heartbeat of memory itself. And somewhere, in a modest apartment across town, a child dreamed safely, one hand curled around her stuffed puppy, the other resting on the loyal K9 who had kept her world from breaking. The next morning broke cold and gray, the kind of Iowa dawn that made even city sounds seem muffled. Reporters already crowded the courthouse steps, cameras fogging from their own breath. Inside, Judge Harriet Collins felt the weight of anticipation pressing through the marble halls. Today would bring closing arguments, and perhaps for one small girl, an ending she could grow up with. Officer Donna Ruiz arrived early. Rex trotted at her side, vest freshly brushed, eyes sharp as ever. She paused outside the courtroom door and inhaled deeply. One more day, buddy, she whispered. The dog gave a low huff, as if answering, we've got this. Inside, Claire Miller sat with her daughter, murmuring soft reassurances. Aubrey clutched a tiny plastic police badge someone from the department had given her that morning. She kept glancing toward Rex, as though his presence still held the room together. When the gavel struck, the murmur died. Court is now in session for closing statements, Judge Collins announced. Her tone carried authority, Yet underneath was something gentler, an unspoken promise to see the truth through. Prosecutor Liam Hayes rose first. His voice was calm, steady, built on years of choosing words that mattered. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, sometimes justice doesn't come from what we see, but from what we hear and who we choose to listen to. He gestured toward the child sitting quietly by her mother. Yesterday, a 3-year-old reminded us that truth has no age. He spoke of the body cam footage, the audio timestamp, the sensory details only a witness could know. He described the courage it took for a child to speak, and the instinct of a police dog to protect, not attack. Rex didn't just follow commands, Hayes said. He followed compassion. The courtroom was utterly still. Even the defense attorney looked uneasy. When Hayes finished, he simply nodded toward the little girl. That's all the state has, Your Honor. Sometimes the simplest voice is enough. Judge Collins turned. Defense? Attorney Wallace stood, tugging at his tie. He tried to muster confidence, but could find none. Members of the jury, he began, we sympathize with the family. But sympathy is not evidence. We must separate emotion from fact. He paced, gesturing to the defendant. My client insists he was misidentified. There were shadows, confusion. A bark cut him off. Rex, who had been lying quietly, lifted his head and barked once sharp, deliberate, startling in the solemn hall. Gasps rippled through the room. Aubrey's eyes went wide, but she didn't look scared. She looked certain. Rex, Dana whispered, hand on his collar, but the damage, or perhaps the truth, was already done. The defendant had flinched violently, face draining of color. For the first time, everyone saw real fear in him. Judge Collins's gavel struck twice. Order, she said. The sound echoed off wood and marble. But the silence that followed was heavier still. Wallace tried to continue, voice cracking. The animal's behavior is irrelevant, Your Honor. Collins studied him, then the accused. Perhaps. But fear, Mr. Wallace, is rarely irrelevant. The jury had seen it too. During recess, the hallway buzzed. Reporters whispered about the bark that broke the lie. Dana kept Rex calm in a side room, stroking his fur. She wasn't sure what he sensed, nerves, deceit, or some hidden cue, but she trusted him. Judge Collins joined them quietly. That was unusual, she said. Yes, ma'am, Dana replied. But he doesn't bark without reason. Collins nodded. Sometimes instinct exposes what evidence cannot. She crouched, meeting Rex's eyes. You've done more for this case than half the witness list. When the final session resumed, the defendant looked smaller somehow, his shoulders drawn in. Hayes didn't even need to say more. The jury's eyes told the story. Hours later, when they filed back with the verdict, the courtroom air turned electric. We find the defendant guilty on all counts. A sob of relief escaped Claire's lips. Dana felt tears sting her own eyes. Judge Collins's gavel came down softly, almost reverently, as if sealing not just a case, but a circle of healing. After the courtroom emptied, Collins lingered on the bench. She'd seen thousands of verdicts, but none like this, where truth had arrived in such unexpected voices. She looked down to where the little girl now stood petting Rex. Miss Aubrey, she called softly. The child turned, badge still pinned proudly to her dress. You helped us all today, the judge said. Would you do something for me? Aubrey nodded. Keep being brave, Collins said. And keep talking to good dogs. The courtroom chuckled, gentle and genuine. Even the bailiff smiled. Aubrey grinned. Okay, he listens better than people. Outside, the sky had cleared. Autumn sunlight spilled across the courthouse steps, and for once, the reporters stayed quiet, simply watching. Claire lifted her daughter into her arms. Dana stood nearby, Rex sitting tall like a sentinel. "Thank you," Claire said, voice trembling. "You gave us back more than justice. You gave us peace." Donna shook her head. "It wasn't me. It was her." She looked down at the child, then at Rex. And him. Aubrey giggled. "He needs ice cream." Dana laughed. "You know what, kiddo? You're absolutely right." They walked together down the steps, sunlight warm on their faces. The camera shutters clicked softly, but no one spoke. For a brief, perfect moment, silence itself felt like respect. Judge Collins watched from her window above. She thought of all the trials she had presided over, cold cases, lost families, forgotten victims, and realized this one would stay with her. Because in that courtroom, truth hadn't shouted. It had barked once, and a child had answered. That night, downtown lights shimmered across the Des Moines River. At the police canine facility, Dana unbuckled Rex's vest and let him run free in the yard. He bounded joyfully, chasing invisible memories, finally pausing to look back at her. "You did good, partner," she murmured. "Real good." Inside the Miller apartment, Claire tucked Aubrey into bed. The little badge sat on the nightstand beside her stuffed puppy. "Mommy," she whispered sleepily. "Rex said we're safe now." Claire smiled through tears. "Then we are." Outside, sirens wailed faintly in the distance, life carrying on, but inside two homes, peace finally settled. In one, a dog dreamed beside his handler. In the other, a child dreamed beside her hope. And somewhere between them, justice, at last, felt human. 2 weeks had passed since the verdict, yet echoes of that courtroom still lingered through Des Moines. Newspapers carried the headline, "3-year-old's words help seal conviction." Local radio hosts called it the case that made a city believe in innocence again. But for those who had lived it, the story wasn't over. For Officer Donna Ruiz, it was the first morning in a long while that didn't start with tension in her chest. She sat in the quiet of the canine facility, polishing Rex's collar tag. The dog sat beside her, alert but calm, as if sensing her thoughts. The brass gleamed in the sunlight spilling through the window. "Rex, Unit 17, Service and Loyalty." "Guess what, partner?" she said softly. "You got mail." She slid a small envelope across the desk. The handwriting was clumsy letters, tilted, uneven. Inside was a drawing. Rex, with a big smile and a shiny gold star. Underneath, in shaky blue crayon, were the words, "To Rex, you're my hero. Love, Aubrey." Dana's throat tightened. She reached into the envelope again and found something else, a folded note written in Claire's neat cursive. "Dana, Aubrey sleeps better now. She keeps Rex's picture by her bed and talks to him every night. I think that dog helped her find her voice again. We can never repay you both, but we want to try. Next Saturday, we're hosting a small thank you event at the community park. Aubrey wants to give Rex a real medal. Please come. Claire." Dana exhaled slowly. She looked down at Rex, who wagged his tail once, as if he'd already made the decision for her. That Saturday morning dawned crisp and bright, the sky the color of pale glass. The community park was already filling with people, neighbors, local officers, even Judge Collins, who had traded her robe for a navy coat and scarf. Children ran across the grass, clutching tiny flags. A small podium stood near the fountain, decorated with balloons in blue and gold. Claire and Aubrey waited near the front. The little girl wore a white dress with a tiny police patch sewn to the sleeve. When Dana and Rex approached, Aubrey's face lit up. "You came," she squealed, running forward. Rex lowered his head so she could hug him, tail wagging in rhythmic thumps against the grass. "Wouldn't miss it for the world," Dana said, smiling. Judge Collins stepped up to the microphone as the crowd quieted. We gather today, she began, not as a court, but as a community to honor courage, loyalty, and the extraordinary bond between one child and one dog. The applause came softly, genuine. She turned toward Dana. Officer Ruiz, your dedication exemplifies what it means to protect and serve. And Rex, well, I think he speaks for himself. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Rex barked once, perfectly timed, and everyone clapped again. Then Judge Collins gestured toward Aubrey. And this young lady has something very special to present. Aubrey stepped forward, holding a small red box with both hands. Inside was a medal, clearly homemade, a large plastic circle wrapped in gold foil, strung on a blue ribbon. On it, written carefully in marker, were the words, "Goodest boy." She placed it gently around Rex's neck. The dog sat perfectly still, eyes soft, tail sweeping the ground in quiet rhythm. "Thank you for saving my mommy," Aubrey whispered, kissing his muzzle. A tear escaped down Claire's cheek. Dana blinked hard, pretending to adjust Rex's vest just to hide her own. Judge Collins leaned toward the microphone again. "Sometimes," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "heroes don't wear uniforms or speak our language. Sometimes they just listen when it matters most." After the ceremony, people lingered. Children took turns petting Rex. Adults shook Dana's hand. Camera flashes sparkled, but they didn't feel intrusive, more like a celebration than a spectacle. A local reporter asked softly, "Officer Ruiz, what's next for you two?" Dana smiled, glancing at her partner. "We go back to work. There's always someone who needs listening to." Later, as the crowd thinned, Claire approached her. "He's changed everything," she said. "Aubrey talks more now." She laughs again. Sometimes she wakes up in the night, and instead of crying, she says she can hear Rex bark inside her dream. Dana smiled gently. "He has that effect on people." Claire hesitated. "There's something else. I didn't tell you before, but that night, the night of the attack, Aubrey was holding a stuffed puppy. It was the only thing she didn't lose. She calls it Little Rex. I think she wants him to meet the real one again before we move." "Move?" Dana asked. Claire nodded. "We're going to live with my sister in Colorado. Fresh start. New air." Dana looked down at the child playing nearby with the dog. "That sounds perfect." A week later, they met one last time at the edge of town. The sky stretched wide and golden, the horizon blurring into cornfields. Claire loaded the last box into her car. Aubrey ran to Dana and hugged her fiercely. "Don't forget me," she said. Dana smiled. "Never." Rex nuzzled the girl's shoulder, letting out a low, soft whine. Aubrey held his face between her hands. "You're still my hero," she whispered. Claire hugged Dana tight. "Thank you for everything. For listening when nobody else did." When they drove away, the child's hand pressed against the rear window until the car turned out of sight. Rex sat watching for a long time, ears pricked, tail still. Dana rested a hand on his neck. "Come on, partner," she murmured. "Let's go home." That night, as she filed her final report, a knock sounded on her office door. Judge Collins stepped in, carrying a manila envelope. "Thought you should see this," she said, handing it over. Inside was a letter from the State Police Board, an official commendation for Rex and his handler, citing exceptional service and contribution to community trust. At the bottom, a handwritten note from the chief read, "Some dogs follow orders. Yours followed his heart." Dana smiled quietly. "He always does." The judge lingered at the doorway. "You know, Officer Ruiz, that case reminded us all why we joined this profession in the first place. Not for control, for compassion." Dana nodded. Sometimes compassion is the only command that matters. Later, In the dark stillness of the facility, she sat beside Rex's kennel. He was already dozing, the homemade medal hanging proudly on his collar. The drawing from Aubrey Rex with his gold star was pinned to the wall above them. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees. Somewhere beyond the city lights, a little girl slept soundly in a new home, clutching her stuffed puppy close. Dana reached over, gently scratching Rex's head. "She's okay now," she whispered. "You did that?" Rex's tail thumped once, slow and content. And for the first time in years, Dana let herself believe that maybe, in a world full of chaos, quiet goodness could still win. Winter crept softly across Iowa, frosting rooftops and turning the Des Moines River into a slow-moving mirror. Life in the city went on, new cases, new faces, but for Officer Dana Ruiz, some days still felt strangely quiet. Without the Miller case filling every hour, she finally heard the silence it had left behind. Each morning she trained with Rex in the snow-dusted field behind the canine facility. Commands echoed, breath clouded. The dog was older now, his muzzle sprinkled with gray, but his focus never wavered. He would sit, wait, and then leap through the obstacle course with the same disciplined grace that had once saved a child's life. "Still got it, partner," Dana murmured, tossing him his favorite toy. The bright orange ball vanished into the white drifts, and Rex bounded after it, tail slicing the air like a metronome of loyalty. That evening, when she checked the department mailbox, a small padded envelope waited with Colorado postage. The return name made her smile instantly, Claire Miller. Inside was a photo. Little Aubrey, bundled in a pink coat, standing in front of a snow-covered house with mountains behind her. In her hands, she held the same stuffed puppy, little Rex. A note was tucked beneath the photo. "Dear Officer Dana, we're doing great. Aubrey started preschool and tells everyone she has a police dog best friend. She sleeps better now. Sometimes she says she dreams about Rex chasing snowflakes. Thank you for giving her that peace. With love, Claire and Aubrey." Dana pressed the photo to her chest. For months she had wondered whether the healing would last. Now she had her answer. The following week brought a call she didn't expect. Judge Collins. "Officer Ruiz," the judge said over the phone, her voice measured yet warm. "There's a judicial conference next month on trauma-informed justice. They've asked me to present the Miller case. Would you and Rex consider joining us?" Dana hesitated. Public speaking isn't exactly Rex's strong suit. Collins chuckled. "That's fine. He just needs to be himself. People listen to that dog more than they do to half my colleagues." Dana agreed. Maybe this was how the story kept working, by being retold. When the conference day arrived, the courthouse auditorium filled with judges, officers, and social workers. Dana stood at the edge of the stage, palms damp, while Rex sat beside her, steady as stone. Judge Collins began. "A courtroom can feel cold," she told the crowd. "But sometimes the law meets the human heart in ways we can't predict." She recounted the case, the frightened child, the loyal dog, the bark that broke a lie. Then she motioned for Dana to join her. Dana swallowed hard and stepped forward. "I used to think my job was about control," she said. "But Rex taught me it's about connection. That little girl didn't just remember a sound, she trusted one. And that trust helped us all find the truth." Rex gave a quiet chuff, as if agreeing. Laughter rippled gently through the room. After the session, dozens of people came to meet them. A young social worker said, "I've never seen a case where empathy mattered more than evidence." Dana smiled. Sometimes empathy is the evidence. That night, the story of Rex and Aubrey appeared again on local news. Soft piano music, footage of the medal ceremony, the smiling child. Dana watched from her couch, coffee growing cold in her hands. She thought of all the children whose stories never reached a courtroom. Maybe this one had changed something for them too. A week later, life returned to routine. Calls came in, patrols continued. But one cold Thursday, a new case hit too close. A domestic disturbance report, child present, possible injury. Donna's stomach twisted as she recognized the address. Only a few streets from the original crime scene. She drove there in silence, Rex pacing behind the cage partition. Snow fell in tiny silver flakes, blanketing the night. When they arrived, officers were already outside. A woman stood trembling on the porch. Inside, a young boy sobbed. Dana approached slowly, crouching beside the child. "Hey there, buddy. I'm Dana. This is Rex. He's really good at listening." The boy sniffled, eyes wide. "Can he keep secrets?" "Only the important ones," she said gently. Within minutes, Rex had eased closer, resting his head against the boy's knee. The child's breathing steadied. Dana felt something familiar wash through her, an echo of that courtroom day when fear had met understanding. Later, as paramedics tended to the family, Dana looked at Rex. "Looks like your work's not done yet." That night, back at the station, she wrote her report but kept drifting. Every sound, the clack of keys, the murmur of radios seemed distant. When she finished, she pulled out her phone and sent Claire a picture of Rex in the snow. She added a short message, "Still listening. Always. Within minutes." The reply came, a heart emoji and a photo of Aubrey holding her stuffed puppy beside a snowman wearing a toy badge. Dana smiled, eyes misting. Life went on. But their stories stayed intertwined, like invisible threads stretching across miles. Spring came quietly. One morning, while training, Dana noticed Rex slowing slightly during drills. Nothing serious, just age showing its first soft whisper. She crouched beside him, rubbing his ears. "You've earned some rest, old boy." When she brought it up to the chief, he nodded. "He's close to retirement. Maybe let him finish the season. After that, we'll honor him properly." The words hit harder than she expected. Rex had been her partner for 7 years. He wasn't just a canine. He was the bridge between people and hope. That evening, she sat with him by the river, watching sunlight flicker across the water. "You think you're ready to retire?" she asked. Rex rested his head on her knee, sighing softly. "Yeah," she whispered. "Me neither." Weeks later, the department organized a small ceremony, simple, dignified. Officers lined up, hands clasped behind their backs. Judge Collins came too, wearing civilian clothes and a smile. Claire and Aubrey surprised everyone by flying in. When Aubrey saw Rex, she squealed, running across the grass. "He remembered me." Rex barked once, low and joyful, tail sweeping like a flag. The child hugged him tightly, whispering something only he could hear. During the speech, Collins said, "In every courtroom, there are those who enforce the law, and those who remind us why we do." Rex reminded us. Then she pinned a small official medal beside Aubrey's homemade one. "For distinguished service," the inscription read. Dana could barely hold back tears. She bent down and hugged her partner. "Time to enjoy the easy life, hero." The crowd applauded, some wiping their eyes. That night, long after everyone had gone home, Dana sat alone at her desk. The medals hung side by side on the wall, gold foil and real brass, equal in meaning. She took out the latest letter from Claire and read it once more. "You helped my daughter find her voice." Outside, rain began to fall softly, tapping against the window. Rex lay curled on the rug, breathing slow and even. Dana closed her notebook and whispered, "We did good, partner. Really good." And for the first time in years, she turned off the light without fear of the dark. Spring turned to summer, and the Iowa skies widened with color. Officer Dana Ruiz had grown used to quieter mornings, no radio calls, no sirens waiting to pull her from sleep. After Rex's retirement, she'd taken on a lighter role at the department, training new K-9 recruits. Still, every time a young handler passed by with a barking dog, her chest tightened with nostalgia. Rex spent his days sprawled on her porch, half asleep in the sun, occasionally perking up at the sound of neighborhood kids. He'd earned the rest, but sometimes Dana caught him staring toward the gate, as if waiting for duty to call again. It had been nearly a year since the Miller case. Aubrey was thriving according to Claire's letters. She loved art class, and every week she drew new pictures of police dogs with wings. But one warm morning, a new message arrived that made Dana's hand still over her coffee cup. Dana, I hate to ask, but something's come up. Aubrey's been having new dreams about that night. She says there was someone else there. Someone we never identified. I'm not sure what's real, but it's scaring her again. Could you help us talk through it? Claire. Dana read the message twice. The case was closed. The man who'd hurt them already serving time. But trauma didn't respect paperwork. Sometimes the truth lived deeper, buried beneath a child's fragile understanding. And if Aubrey was remembering something now, it mattered. She called Claire immediately. Bring her here. Let's see if we can figure this out together. 2 days later, the silver Subaru pulled into Dana's driveway. Aubrey hopped out, taller now, but still clutching her stuffed little Rex. When the real Rex appeared on the porch, she ran straight to him, laughing. He's bigger than I remember. Dana smiled. He missed you. They spent the afternoon in the backyard, soft sunlight weaving through oak leaves. Dana kept the atmosphere easy, letting the girl draw with chalk on the pavement while they talked about her school, her new friends, and the puppy drawings. Then Aubrey's chalk stopped moving. Sometimes, she said quietly, I hear a noise. Not barking. Something else. Like shoes ... running. Dana exchanged a glance with Claire, who looked worried. She knelt beside Aubrey. When do you hear it, sweetheart? Aubrey tapped her chest. In here. When I close my eyes. It wasn't the kind of clue that fit in a report, but it was something. Dana knew trauma often hid truth in symbols. Would it help if we looked at some pictures together? She asked. You can tell me what feels familiar. Aubrey nodded. That evening, Dana set out an old tablet loaded with photos from the investigation-safe ones, not graphic. Mostly images of the street, the patrol cars, the courtroom. Aubrey looked quietly, her small finger tracing each screen. Then she froze at one picture, the old neighbor's house across from theirs. Her lips parted. There? There? Dana asked gently. The light, Aubrey said. Someone was standing there that night. I saw them. Claire's hand flew to her mouth. We never knew anyone else was outside. Dana leaned closer. Can you remember anything else about them? Aubrey shook her head, whispering, just. They didn't move. But they were watching. That single word watching stayed with Dana, long after they'd left. She spent the next few days combing through old files. No record mentioned a witness. No one had claimed to see anything that night. But across the report's margins, an old note caught her attention. Motion sensor triggered at 2:17 a.m., East Side Yard. No suspect found. That was nearly 15 minutes before the call for help came in. She called Detective Leland, her old supervisor. You remember that sensor alert from the Miller file? He sighed. Yeah, we figured it was an animal. Camera was busted. What if it wasn't? There was a pause. You think someone else was there? I think a 3-year-old saw more than any of us realized. A week later, Dana drove back to the Miller home. Claire welcomed her with a mix of hope and fear. Do you really think after all this time? Dana nodded. If there was another person, even just watching, we need to know why. They walked the perimeter together. The old wooden fence leaned slightly inward, weathered from seasons. At the far corner, half hidden behind weeds, Dana noticed a section of dirt slightly disturbed, newer than the rest. She crouched and brushed it aside. Something glinted in the soil. A small rusted keychain, faded, shaped like a dog tag. She wiped it clean. The engraving was barely visible, but legible enough. SM. Claire's eyes widened. Samuel, our old neighbor. He moved the week after the trial. Dana's pulse quickened. She remembered his name from a brief mention. He'd been interviewed once, claimed he'd heard nothing that night. No record beyond that. But why would his keychain be buried near the fence? The next day, she requested the old surveillance drive from the department archives. It took hours, but finally, she found a short, grainy clip from a street camera 2 houses down. At 2:18 a.m., a faint silhouette appeared by the miller's gate, tall, hooded, unmoving. The image was low res, but the timestamp matched the sensor log. Someone had been there. Her stomach tightened. The man who'd attacked Claire had claimed he acted alone. Had he been telling the truth after all? That night, Dana couldn't sleep. Memories of Aubrey's small voice replayed in her mind. They were watching. She got up, made coffee, and sat by the window where Rex lay snoring softly. His paw twitched as if he were chasing something in a dream. "Guess we're not done yet," she whispered. By morning, she'd contacted Detective Leland again. Together, they reopened the case on paper. A warrant followed for the neighbor, Samuel Myers, now living 2 towns away. When they arrived, his house sat silent, shades drawn. Inside, they found dusty furniture, and in the basement, a box marked security tools. Among them, an unregistered camera, matching serial numbers to one that had gone missing from the original scene. Dana's chest went cold. Myers hadn't just been watching, he'd recorded. A week later, the footage surfaced. Corroded, but recoverable. It showed the night of the attack from a distance. Headlights flashing, shouting, and then before the chaos a shadowy figure walking past the Miller home, phone in hand. The camera shook, then cut off. But one moment was clear. The man who attacked Claire had looked toward the lens, as if expecting someone there. It was confirmation and betrayal wrapped together. The footage changed everything. Investigators reopened the file, linking Myers to a string of voyeurism reports across the county. He'd been filming families for years, feeding information to others through an underground forum. The man who'd attacked Claire hadn't chosen them by chance. When the trial reopened, Aubrey didn't have to testify this time. Her memory had already done its part. But she and Claire came to court anyway, sitting quietly in the gallery. When Myers was let in, Aubrey squeezed her mother's hand. "Is he the one from the fence?" Dana whispered. Aubrey nodded faintly, her eyes brave and bright. He was the shadow. Dana felt a lump rise in her throat. That small voice had broken silence twice, once in fear, now in strength. After the verdict, the 3 of them stepped into the sunlight together. Reporters waited outside, but Dana waved them off. "Not today," she said. This moment didn't belong to headlines. It belonged to healing. Claire looked at her through tears. "How do you thank someone for giving your child her truth back?" Dana smiled softly. "You don't. You just live it." Aubrey knelt to hug Rex, who had come along for moral support. He wagged his tail lazily, his fur shining in the afternoon sun. "Can we go home now?" the little girl asked. Claire kissed her head. "Yes, sweetheart. We can go home." That evening, as the sky turned orange over Des Moines, Dana watched mother and daughter drive away. She looked down at Rex, who leaned against her leg. "You did it again, partner," she murmured. even in retirement. Rex blinked, eyes calm and wise, as if he knew. For a moment, Dana felt the weight of every story they had carried. The danger, the loss, the small miracles. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the faintest sound of laughter from somewhere down the street. And she knew the memory wasn't hidden anymore. It had simply been waiting for light. Autumn came softly to Des Moines, the kind of season that whispered instead of shouted. Leaves painted the streets in rust and gold, and the air carried the faint chill of endings and beginnings. For Officer Donna Ruiz, life had finally found a quiet rhythm. The past year had been heavy, but something inside her had shifted since the second trial. Justice had been restored. The ghosts that lingered in the corners of her memory had started to fade. Rex, now officially retired, moved slower, but still carried his quiet dignity. Every morning, he'd limp to the porch with his favorite toy, watch the sunrise, and thump his tail twice his own little ritual of gratitude. One Sunday morning, Dana stood in the kitchen, coffee steaming in her hands, when a letter slid through the mail slot. The handwriting stopped her small, looping letters, written with care. She smiled instantly. It was from Aubrey. Dear Dana and Rex, I miss you both. I drew a picture at school. My teacher said we could draw our heroes. I drew Rex and you and my mommy. You're all smiling, and Rex has wings because he's brave like angels. Mommy says you might come visit soon. Can you bring his medal? Love, Aubrey. Dana's chest tightened. She carried the letter outside, where Rex lay under the oak tree, half asleep. Hear that, partner? She murmured. We've been summoned. He raised his head, as if understanding every word, tail brushing the grass once in approval. A week later, Dana loaded Rex into her truck and drove west, through the rolling fields of Iowa toward Colorado. The trip took most of the day, the horizon slowly changing from flat farmland to jagged, snow-tipped peaks. The air grew thinner, cleaner. When they finally reached the small town of Evergreen, evening light spilled like honey over pine trees and rooftops. Claire was waiting outside the house, a cozy wood-framed home at the edge of a hill. She waved, smiling through tears. Aubrey burst through the door before the truck even stopped. Rex, she shouted, running toward him. The dog's ears perked. He barked once and bounded forward, stiff-legged but joyous, knocking her straight into laughter. Dana stepped out, her heart full. You've grown, kiddo. Aubrey grinned. And you still look like a superhero. Inside, the house felt warm, lived-in paintings on the wall, the smell of cinnamon and crayons in the air. Claire handed Dana a mug of tea, her smile tired but peaceful. She's been waiting for this day all week. I can tell, Dana said, glancing toward the living room where Aubrey sat on the rug, showing Rex her new drawings. One showed him standing between two hearts, his medal shining in gold marker. Another showed Dana herself, kneeling beside him under a big blue sky. She remembers everything, Claire said quietly, but it doesn't scare her anymore. She says memories are just stories we keep until we're strong enough to tell them. Dana looked at her, moved. That's wise for her age. Claire smiled. I think she learned it from watching you. That evening, the three of them walked to a nearby hill overlooking the town. The sunset spilled across the sky in pinks and oranges, lighting the mountains like fire. Rex trotted ahead, stopping now and then to sniff the cool wind. Aubrey reached for Dana's hand. Do you think Rex remembers everything that happened? Dana smiled. I think he remembers what matters. The love, the voices, the people he helped. Then he's like me, Aubrey said simply. Claire's eyes shimmered. She crouched beside her daughter, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Yes, baby. Just like you. They stood there in silence for a while, watching the last light sink beyond the hills. Dana looked down at Rex, who sat still beside them, the fading glow caught in his eyes. For a moment, she could almost see him as Aubrey did an angel, with fur and patience and loyalty beyond reason. That night, after dinner and laughter and too many cookies, Dana tucked Aubrey into bed. The child's room was full of stars, glow-in-the-dark stickers on the ceiling, soft fairy lights on the walls. Rex curled up beside her bed without being asked, his head resting on his paws. "Dana?" Aubrey whispered sleepily. "Yeah, sweetheart?" If Rex could talk, what do you think he'd say to me? Dana smiled softly, sitting at the edge of the bed. "I think he'd say he's proud of you, that you're brave, and that he's always close, even when you don't see him." Aubrey nodded, eyes heavy. "That's what I thought too." Within minutes, she was asleep. Claire stood in the doorway, wiping a tear. "You always know the right thing to say," she whispered. Dana shook her head. "It's easy when you're just telling the truth." Later that night, when the house had gone quiet, Dana stepped onto the porch. The sky stretched wide and deep, full of stars that shimmered like scattered promises. Rex lay beside her, head resting on her boot. "You did good, old boy," she murmured. "Better than any of us ever could." He let out a low sigh, the content kind that meant he understood. She reached down and brushed her fingers through his fur, feeling the steady rhythm of his breathing. "You know, Rex," she said softly, "some people talk about heroes like they're bigger than life. But maybe heroes are just the ones who listen when it matters most." He blinked up at her, tail tapping the porch once. The sound echoed like a quiet yes. Morning came with pale gold light streaming through the curtains. The smell of pancakes filled the air. Aubrey's laughter drifted from the kitchen as Claire flipped breakfast, and for the first time in years, Dana felt completely at peace. But peace, like life, is fragile. When she stepped outside to check on Rex, he was still lying in the same spot, head resting on his paws, eyes closed. The metal around his neck glimmered faintly in the morning sun. For a long moment, Dana didn't move. She just knelt beside him, hand on his fur. He looked peaceful, like he'd simply drifted into a dream he'd been waiting for. Tears filled her eyes, but her smile held steady. "You kept your promise, partner," she whispered. "You saw her safe." Inside, Aubrey's laughter carried through the screen door. Dana looked toward the sound, a sound of life continuing, and nodded. "I'll take it from here." That afternoon, they buried Rex beneath the big oak behind Claire's house, the one overlooking the valley. Aubrey placed his toy bone beside him, along with a drawing him with wings, standing in sunlight. When it was done, Dana stood back, heart heavy but full. The breeze stirred through the leaves, carrying a whisper of movement that almost sounded like a bark in the distance. Claire touched her shoulder. "He was more than a dog, wasn't he?" Dana nodded. "He was the bridge. Between fear and courage. Between silence and truth." They stood there together as the sun began to set, warm and bright and forgiving. Weeks later, back in Iowa, Dana pinned a new photo above her desk, Aubrey's drawing of Rex with wings. Under it, she wrote one simple line. "He listened when the world forgot how." And every time she trained a new canine unit, she told them the same story, not about crime or courtroom drama, but about a girl who found her voice, a mother who found peace, and a dog whose quiet loyalty changed them all. Because heroes, she'd learned, don't always roar. Sometimes they just stay and love until the light returns.